Welcome, low ego action heroes. This is Debbie Levitt from Delta CX. We are a full service CX and UX consultancy, and welcome to episode 116, Customer-Centric Agile, Making CX and UX Lean and Agile. This is the part 2 to episode 115. So if you haven't watched that one yet, it is a long one, but I suggest you get that one done first, and then this is kind of the second half of that. It's hot over here. I have a fan running. If the fan is bothering the people in the audience, let me know and I'll turn it off. Hi, Charlene. But since this is going to be another 2-hour marathon because I have 80 slides, I want to jump right in. So let's press all the buttons that let me do that. Wrong buttons. It should be this screen. There we go. Wrong screen. Okay. Hopefully now you are seeing my slides. They say Understanding Lean and Agile. Hi, Ekta. So let's jump in. Agile and Lean are really excellent in concept and typically awfully executed. To help us battle this wherever we work, let's look at some of the core principles and definitions of Lean and Agile. Then we'll look at how we bring customer centricity into both of these. Remember, this isn't meant to be a boring lecture. It's meant to give you ammunition for when you're struggling with people who can only see things in terms of how agile or lean something is. And note that everything I'm going to teach you today is easily Googleable. If you find you're curious about a concept and you want to go deeper into it, please Google it. Let's make sure my slides are changing. Yes. Okay, great. So PSE is my term just for short for products, services, and experiences, whatever your company sells or offers. Lean defines value as the PSE provided to customers at the right time at an appropriate price. This is defined in each case by the customer. Hi, Irina. Stakeholders don't decide what has value. The highest paid person doesn't decide what has value. We should use our qualitative research to understand what customers need and what has value to them. Lean defines value added as something changing the PSE's form or function that the customer is willing to pay for, but only if it's done correctly the first time. All those cycles of non-CX teammates guessing at what customers want and then having to fix or redo them later, that's called lean waste, and we're supposed to identify that, reduce it, or eliminate it. You can see why it's called lean. Lean Six Sigma has a value stream map. This is a variation of a process flow diagram mapping out an internal process to find wastes. You can't really see this one, but it shows getting a request from a customer, talking to them, and building what they say. Well, that's got waste we should cut, but the value stream map is good to know about. You could use one to show where guessing what customers needed or stabbing at it by committee leads to wasted internal time and money. You can then socialize how the process should go to have the least waste. Anybody claiming to care about lean should love that. The original definition of lean includes 8 types of waste that we want to identify and cut. These were originally meant for manufacturing and factories. They are defects, overproduction, waiting, non-utilized talent, transportation, inventory, motion, and extra processing. The first letters of each spell downtime as a way to remember them. I'll touch quickly on some that are relevant to digital products. Reduce defects. Engineering claims they want products without defects, so they test for bugs before it goes live. But what about defects in the product concept? What about the execution of the concept, our information architecture and interaction design? Our workplaces sometimes ship poor experiences because we didn't do enough research, or we didn't learn what would best match customers, or we didn't have the right time or staff to create a better execution. These are concept and execution defects we need to reduce. They have nothing to do with engineering bugs. Non-utilized talent is a huge problem. For many of us, this has been the story of our careers. We were hired for our talent, skill, experience, specialization, etc., but the workplace treated us like order takers who make pretty screens. Our low maturity workplace didn't understand what we do, so they overruled us, circumvented us, and didn't give us the time, budget, and resources we needed. All of this is a huge waste that can be improved upon. If we're hiring the wrong people for UX jobs, or we're not getting what we need to do our best work, this would be lean waste that should be cut. Lean doesn't mean skimping on important tasks or circumventing specialists. It's about cutting wastes where they can be cut. That means that traditional definitions of lean disagree that lean is the least you can do to move to the next step. We probably got this from The Lean Startup and then lots of books running with the same incorrect definition of lean. This is another common mistake made when the word lean gets thrown around. People think that if they just do less and go faster, they're being lean. But you're not being lean unless you're finding internal and external defects and reducing or eliminating those. Doing the least we can is the opposite of customer centricity, the opposite of quality, and it's the opposite of what your favorite companies do. When you took that new iPhone out of the box and admired it, did you say, "Yep, this is the result of Apple teams doing the least they could do to just move their projects forward"? Or did you imagine that your iPhone was a level of craftsmanship and design only attainable by having experts spend time and money trying to really get things right? I'm not saying that Apple gets it right all the time, but they're an example of a company doing a lot right. We quote Steve Jobs all over the place, and then we do nothing the way that Apple does it. People who read books about startups think that the MVP, minimum viable product, is a way to figure out what customers want. But to do that, you have to have engineering completely build it, test it, merge it, and release it. You take your chances with real trial or paying customers. Risk is high. You wait to hear from customer support or marketing if people like this or not. You hope they're measuring it correctly because, let's face it, sometimes they're not measuring it correctly. The MVP concept is correct in that we can't completely know if our idea and execution are right for users until they try it out. But since the MVP was mostly created around startups who had no product managers and no UX team, people assume that the only way to learn if customers like our product is to release something live to the public. That's where you tend to hear, "just ship it" or "fail fast." I'm saying reframe the MVP. Have UX professionals testing concepts on the public before engineering writes a line of code. Start with UX research so we can learn more about customers. We shouldn't rush into guessing which features should be included until we've learned which features customers will need or expect. Then product and UX can decide on which features we're including based on customer value and prioritization. UX can then do their architecture and prototyping work to bring the concepts to life. Next, we test those on real or potential customers to get the feedback the MVP model is looking for. If the UX testing process shows flaws in the idea, we can quickly fix those in our iterations. Perhaps we just need to cycle back to improving our prototypes. Sometimes we might learn the whole thing is a mess and we need to rethink our features. But the amazing thing to remember here is that engineering hasn't written code, changed databases, created services or APIs, tested code, merged code, etc. While someone is complaining that UX isn't lean or agile because we take some time, we are being lean and agile by making sure we don't waste time, money, worker morale, or customer trust by releasing mistakes. We're trying to reduce defects and waste. And if you do fail fast, it all happened during the UX process and the customers didn't have to struggle with your failure. It was all behind the scenes rather than in the public eye. Also remember that customers don't want minimally viable anything. Customers want maximum value products. And again, traditional flavors of Agile are correct in saying we must collect feedback from customers to know if our product has value and is considered high quality by users. But Agile and the MVP model imagine that we have to collect that feedback after releasing our product, when our risks and costs are highest. Since Agile tends to exclude CX and UX processes and professionals, Agile doesn't realize that we can get that feedback through early concept testing of CX CX prototypes. Teams claiming to be agile burn time and money to learn very late in the game that we've gone in the wrong direction. People who don't understand CX or UX imagine that building something and releasing it to the public is a low-risk way to test a concept on customers. But they don't realize how high risk it is to have handfuls of engineers coding and testing and deploying something that the public can see, that our competitors can see, that the media and investors can see. It's a high-ego adventure that imagines that paying customers don't mind being crash test dummies and being stuck with a partial, minimally viable feature set or product while the engineering team creates a product in rounds of slow-motion guesses. We've got some ego to imagine our users are okay with that. The very earliest moments of project planning must already be focused on customers' needs. CX teammates should be part of project planning before we approve features that have low or no customer value. We used to do this. It was called R&D, research and development. Someone decided that R&D wasn't as cool as pretending that we were a startup and just rushing out guesses. Focusing on faster has lowered product quality and customer satisfaction. We are our company's lower cost and faster R&D team. If you have an R&D team, let's partner with them. We must get back to believing in R&D and R before D. By the way, I do a variation of the last slide, which was a graph that showed the process of UX and engineering and stuff, and where would people want to learn that their idea is going in the wrong place. And I do a variation of this when I present to engineering, product, and marketing audiences. I run it as a poll, and I ask them to place a dot where they wish they were learning that the product is flawed and our solution isn't the right way to go. And I find that as I'm showing on the screen, a couple of people put their dots where engineering was building. They wanted to learn that while engineering was building. But everybody else wanted to learn it way earlier in the process, according to the poll. And this would be risk mitigation. We're making sure that the concept and the solution are the right way to go, so we're not wasting time on engineering, marketing, and other costs of poor quality. I'll be talking more later about the costs of poor quality. Agile in general. So in general, what's agile? Agile is the ability to create change and respond to change. Agile software development is more than things you may have heard of, like pair programming, test-driven development, stand-ups, planning sessions, and sprints. It's about iterations. It aims to release software efficiently and on a reproducible cadence. For example, let's imagine an engineering team who's in a good groove and can release something to the public at the end of every month. That's reliable and probably efficient. It's about small teams that can manage themselves. It's about those teams taking time for a retrospective, which is where we look at the sprint that just finished. What went right? What went wrong? And how can the team do better next time? And then we're supposed to actually do better next time. This isn't everything Agile is, but it's some of what's at the core. And there isn't just one Agile. There are many methodologies and frameworks. The most common ones you may have heard of include Kanban, Lean, SAFe, Scrum, and XP, also known as Extreme Programming. SAFe is the worst, and I've got lots of slides on them coming up. But really, I haven't seen any flavor of Agile handling customer-centricity well. Agile is about creating software, but people are trying to take what they like from Agile and talk about business agility. Well, considering so few people are getting Agile right, I'm not sure what business agility is or will be. So we're going to focus on agility around the products and software our company builds. Over 20 years ago, some people got together and they started documenting how they thought software development could be more agile. They created 12 principles. Here are my favorite 4. Principle 1, our highest priority is to satisfy the customer. That's directly linked to how valuable, easy to learn, easy to use, and life-improving our products are. This also means that anytime our teams think Agile means go really fast and fix it later, that's not really agility. Principle 5, give motivated individuals the environment and support they need and trust them to get the job done. You have to hire great CX and UX workers and give them trust and what they need. But lovers of Agile rarely do that. They try to control how we work, when we work, and who does our work. So that doesn't work. Principle 9, continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. Design matters. Make it great. And my favorite, Principle 10, simplicity. The art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. This one's really important. It says that if we find our PSE are going in the wrong direction, or if we're spinning up a project that doesn't really have customer value, we should cut it. That would also be lean. There's more gold in the Agile Manifesto principles, like Principle 2. We welcome changing requirements, even late in development. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. If our company uses better processes and makes better decisions, these internal improvements will translate into advantages for customers and competitive advantages for our company. Can you imagine if any team at your company believed in this? Can you imagine if we stopped the project when we realized it's garbage or not quite right for the customer? Can you imagine if the product didn't go live if it's not fully accessible, or our testing shows that customers wouldn't give it 5 stars out of 5? If an engineering lead says it's too late to change something because programmers started it and we might as well finish and release it, that's not agile. If it's sprint 5 and someone late in development is questioning the customer value of this feature, they're supposed to stop everything so we can see if our requirements took us in the wrong direction, which also means writing better requirements, which means we should be involved there too. Here's a graphic from the U.S. Department of Defense document from October 2018 on how to detect BS in Agile. They actually wrote that. The document offers questions that help determine when a project isn't really agile and what answers to listen for. The graphic's hard to read, but here are some of the fantastic flowchart diamonds. Are teams delivering working software to at least some subset of real users every iteration, including the first, and gathering feedback? Note that for many teams, customer feedback means waiting for customer support to tell you people are having trouble, or waiting months for marketing to run a survey. The survey won't tell us what's going wrong, why, and how. We must teach Agile teams that good qualitative CX and UX research is the key to getting the most meaningful and actionable customer feedback. Tell engineering that we are their business intelligence team. Is feedback from users turned into concrete work items for sprint teams on timelines shorter than 1 month? That means when we get feedback, we don't sit on things in the backlog or the icebox forever. We're supposed to work on them within 1 month. And my favorite from this flowchart, are teams empowered to change the requirements based on user feedback? We must change requirements even if that means evolving or scrapping features or entire products based on the feedback of real users. And if any of the answers to these is no, you're getting Agile BS. So says the American Department of Defense. Look for Agile BS on your team. ECTA says, worse still, engineering lead says, people are stupid, or, but I like it, so we'll keep it. Yeah, not agile. That's what I would say to that person. There are many ways to define the quality of a restaurant experience: food, ambiance, service, price, location, and more. Our customers use a variety of criteria to decide if what they bought from us is high quality or was a great experience. Agile typically defines quality as improved software performance, few or no bugs, meets stakeholder requirements. Agile typically defines done as completing the work we plan to do. It fit business objectives. It's coded, tested, documented, and deployable. Their definitions of quality and done seem to be self-reflective. Hey, did I do what I meant to do and it seems to be working well? It's done and it's quality. This is where I'm introducing customer-centricity. Congratulations on writing working code, but does our product match our users' and customers' definitions of quality or done? Does it fit their tasks and needs? Did the system optimize or complicate a workflow? If engineering's code is high quality and it feels done, but the concept doesn't match what customers need, is it still quality? Is it done? Or was all of that time spent engineering the wrong so-called solution a waste of time and budget? Let's not congratulate ourselves so quickly. We must be careful to not use engineering's definitions of quality or done as our only definitions. The feature is not quality or done if the customer would send it back to the kitchen or leave it low ratings. A Scrum trainer and Agile coach posted to LinkedIn that a senior executive at a large corporation said to him, quote, "This definition of done thing is like an insurance policy against crap." End quote. Yes, the definition of done can embody risk mitigation, but only if you use customers' definitions of quality and done. If you only use engineering's measurements about engineering, you're missing the key to that insurance policy and risk mitigation. I even had an attendee at an Agile conference presentation tell me he's terrified of putting quality before speed because their competitor is so fast. I said, put on your critical thinking hat. Do your customers prefer your competitor because they're fast or because they're good? You wouldn't lose business to a competitor that released frequent crappy updates. They might be fast, but more importantly, I bet they're good. You're losing to your competitor because of quality, not because of speed. You're going fast. They're building what customers see as valuable and high quality. Customers leave you for them because the competitor is better at meeting or exceeding customers' needs. Solomon says, every time I hear the word Agile, I imagine the Sonic theme song. Gotta go fast, go, 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 go. I don't know it, but it sounds funny. Aitan says, nice pun. My friend Eli wrote it for me. He painted the Four Horsemen. It's hard to figure out where UX fits into an Agile process. When you look at infographics, most of them start with a product backlog. The product backlog is typically prioritized user stories or features. So it's what engineering will build and in what order. But in a dream world, CX and UX is architecting and designing what ends up in the backlog. And before that, we researched customers, products, services, competitors, support tickets, and anything we needed to understand our opportunities, as well as to inform what we should even architect or design. And by now, you probably know that Agile works in sprints. A sprint is a block of time, normally 1 or 2 weeks. The rule of thumb is 4 weeks or fewer, but I've seen some articles suggesting 6-week sprints. You can see here that this infographic, sorry if you're listening to the audio-only version, this infographic says the Agile sprint starts with design. But don't get too excited. At many companies, this means that anybody can decide what the screens look like, and now the design is done. Many flavors of Agile say you need someone on the team to do UX design, but nearly 0 flavors of Agile suggest that you work with UX specialists. They normally suggest that the engineers do this work because that'll make it go fast. So it's a speed over quality model. And to show you how little flavors of Agile understand what they call design, this is from Safe Agile's webpage about the continuous delivery pipeline. They say that this shows the flow of value through an enterprise's pipeline as they focus on new feature development. According to this page, feature definition takes 4 hours and design takes 4 hours. We must continue to battle the false ideas that CX or UX just needs a few hours to sketch some screens and that's product design. But more importantly, look for those seeing the screen, I apologize to those who aren't, look at how detailed they break down the engineering tasks and steps while summarizing whatever CX or UX will do into a day or less. Safe shows how little they understand UX by having one box here that says design. Imagine one box saying engineering to represent nearly everything else on this screen. Engineers would be furious that we're not detailing their process as it truly is. Charlene says that design part there is good if you're an order taker. This common template for Agile Sprint goals says, our focus is on achievement or outcome. We believe it delivers benefit or impact to customer. This will be confirmed when event happens. Supposedly, this helps teams focus on users and outcomes, but that's not a guarantee, mostly because of one risky word here. Did you see it or hear it? It's believe. Imagine work goals being based on something someone believes, a guess or assumption. Shouldn't we know it delivers certain benefits because the concept has been validated and vetted before we're planning engineering sprints around it? Every time we notice we are guessing, assuming, hypothesizing, making things up, or working based on what someone believes, our CX researchers should study whatever it is so we can know. Step in when you hear people wanting to work from guesses. I've rewritten sprint goals to be more customer-centric. What do you think of this? Our focus is on user or customer outcome. CX or UX has confirmed that it delivers benefit to customer. This benefit will be measured by KPI or metric. In the old version, we're hoping to later confirm that there even was a benefit to the customer. There might have been zero benefits, and you will find that out really late after a lot of expensive engineering time. That's not Agile or Lean. CX can confirm the benefits and value earlier through user-centered design. Now we're not hoping to find out later if something delivered benefits to customers. Now we're just going to measure how much success or failure we had. Big design up front? One problem is that when we say that CX or UX needs to start ahead of engineering, we hear that that's wrong because that's big design up front and we need to get away from that. Wikipedia defines big design up front as an approach where software's design is completed and perfected before implementation is started. It's often associated with the waterfall model of software development. Did your bias and logical fallacy sense tingle, which was covered in part 1, episode 115? It should have. Someone took the work that we need to do before engineering can start building features we're researching and designing, and they gave it a negatively framed name. They associated it with waterfall, which is the opposite of agile. So they gave our work an evil name and connected it to further evil just to convince people that we shouldn't be allowed to research, architect, design, and test upfront. When I speak at engineering, agile, lean, and DevOps events, I remind attendees that CX and UX don't have to design the entire product before engineers can start, but we do have to design and finalize whatever is the customer's workflow or task. We don't design a micro moment from a longer task, decide it's good, and pass it on to engineering for coding. This is because usability testing will probably test the whole task or workflow. I explained that our work is broken into workflows and tasks. We can't just design and finalize entering your credit card number when it's part of a larger checkout experience. The checkout is the task, and we will need to test it holistically. To help explain this, I have this still image from a video that went viral years ago. Someone installed an automatic soap dispenser over a power outlet. You'll get wet soap on your hand and possibly your power plug just as you're connecting to live electricity. The caption I saw in the video was, "This is why we do integration testing as well as unit testing." In case you're not familiar with those terms, unit testing is when engineers test a part of the system to make sure that part works correctly. Integration testing is when you combine parts and modules to test more of the system together. Then I tell the audience, same for us. This is why CX architects and tests complete user workflows rather than separate pieces in isolation. We didn't name our own work Big Design upfront. That name was given to our work by people who wanted to negatively frame it and bully us into minimizing and skimping on our tasks. Engineers around the world are now sure that they don't want CX or UX to do work up front because that would be waterfall. Yet somehow, when developers have to code working software before QA can test what the developers have built, that's not waterfall. That's not big coding up front. Agile and Lean were somewhat inspired by manufacturing and factories, which means efficient assembly lines. Like any assembly line, Agile is a series of small waterfalls. QA can't check code until developers have written enough working code to test. Developers can't write code until they have enough finished work from CX and UX to understand what's being built. It's just an assembly line. That's not a dirty word. Whether or not they want to call our work important or big design up front, our work has to happen before engineering can code it. They have to get research data, information architecture, interaction design, copy, and visual design from the CX team before they can build whatever this is. So don't fall for being called big design up front. It's another manipulation and negative frame. Our work is important business intelligence and risk mitigation. So of course that happens up front and at many points during our process. I can show you a graphic on how CX needs to be 2 or more sprints ahead of engineering. I can tell you how CX needs to start before engineering because if we're populating the backlog with finalized designs, we have to start ahead of engineering. I can call what we do working in sprints, I can call it days. I wrote a whole book on this and it already needs a rewrite. I can show you a variety of models of how CX and UX work with Agile, but I can make this really easy for you because if you're looking at the YouTube video, all 7 models on the screen say the same thing. They all say CX and UX are on their own track. We're not working on the same stories engineering is working on in the same sprint. We're at least 2 sprints ahead, preferably 4 or more. Once you can accept that Agile is about a predictable and reliable assembly line, we can all exhale, put CX on its own track, cut the conflict and control, and get back to work. In fact, no other domain is on engineering's track. Product made a prioritized roadmap well before Sprint 0, and nobody called that big product up front. They're just on their own track, getting their work done. We make time for all kinds of strategy, planning, programming, prioritizing, estimating, and more, and nobody calls this big planning up front. If we're on our own track, engineering can make up all the negative names they want for our work. We will have our autonomy and control back. Safe Agile is quite possibly the worst. Once upon a time, I went for Safe Agile training where when I asked, they told me they had no idea where UX belonged, and if I figure it out, I should tell them. That was 2014. Lean UX gets a little recycle your garbage icon on the bottom left of their infographic with milestones and system team. But does that tell me or anybody how UX works in? Are we in sprints? Are we on the team or outside of it? But if we go back in time to Safe's model before they discovered the Lean UX book, which we covered in episode 115, back to 2017, quote, the basic structure of UX within the SAFE framework includes a UX architect on the portfolio team, information architects on the program team, and 1 UX designer on each feature team, end quote. We were included at every level, even program and portfolio, where we're planning products and features around customer value. Yeah, we were actually involved there and on every Agile team. Then they discovered Lean UX and undid all of it, and nobody spoke out. I always wonder why nobody freaked out at that. We should have protested. Ditch inflexible Agile. Using SAFE as an example, you can't write customer-centricity on a model but have nothing in place and no process or specialists that support and shepherd customer-centricity. You shouldn't write design thinking on anything because it's an aspirology that isn't considered a UX process. UX is siloed out on the side of their infographic with random things SAFe doesn't know what to do with. Is UX anything like milestones, vision, metrics, or roadmap? SAFe doesn't really know what UX even is or does, and nobody puts UX in the corner. SAFe Agile has claimed to use the Lean UX model since 2017. Lean UX was widely hated and disregarded by CX and UX professionals. The model is non-viable, and I consider it an aspirology. I've never heard of a UX team doing Lean UX. CX and UX should be lean, and I like to bring elements from the original definitions of Lean and Lean Six Sigma into my CX and UX strategies and tactics. But it seems like SAFe saw the word lean on a book title, took their critical thinking hats off, and never noticed that Lean UX is neither lean nor UX. But on May 11th, 2021, the author of Lean UX tweeted that he has no idea how his own model works with SAFe Agile. It's nice that he said something, but he's 4 years late. He wrote a blog post about how SAFe isn't agile at all and just doesn't work. One of his reasons was that he's unable to build any customer centricity into it. If he tries to help companies modify SAFe, that's a big problem since that company's SAFe trainers and consultants want them to do things by the book. I and many others still don't like the Lean UX book or model, but at least the author is finally speaking publicly about how agility and customer centricity aren't being combined enough. This means that your main goal at your company is to get out from under engineering's control. Engineering decided that they control UX. They found a willing accomplice happy to sell books and training, and that was Lean UX and its authors. It's time to stand up and speak out against this. Remind managers, leaders, and others at your company that we have to be agile about agile. Don't assume that anything waving a customer centricity flag has anything in their model that is actually customer centric. And when you see bullshit, please don't wait 4 years to say something. Speak out immediately. Agile claims they want feedback even late in the game so they can go in the right direction, right? Let's give them that feedback. Charlene says, I might sound dumb, but what's SAFe? It's just a flavor of Agile. It's a type of Agile. An approach to Agile, it stands for Scaled Agile Framework. And it's all copyrighted and trademarked, and they have all this specialized training and certificates. They are a certificate factory. SAFe Agile has their own core principles. SAFe Principle 9 is about when to decentralize decision-making. Quote, delivering value in the shortest sustainable lead time requires decentralized decision-making. Any decision that must be escalated to higher levels of authority introduces a delay. Of course, not all decisions should be decentralized. Some decisions are strategic, have far-reaching impact, and are outside of the scope, knowledge, or responsibilities of the teams. In addition, leaders are still accountable for outcomes. End quote. Since we want our teams to self-manage, this can make sense. Easy and lower priority decisions can easily be made by team members or the team together without escalation. But not anything that is more strategic or that has a larger impact or is outside of the knowledge of the team. Got it. Remember that SAFe, Scrum.org, and some others are using Lean UX, which is neither Lean nor UX. Lean UX says that UX research planning, execution, interpretation, interaction design, testing, and everything else is done by committee. Never use specialists, covered in episode 115. SAFe says, quote, in Lean UX, this means that most decisions should be made as close to the problem as possible. Therefore, implementing Lean UX functionality becomes the primary responsibility of each Agile team. That's kind of pretzel logic. It sounds like SAFe decided that whatever the project is, Agile teams are closest to that problem, and therefore Agile teams have the power to implement Lean UX. I'd say we're closest to the problem, and engineering teams are closest to the implementation of the solution. But SAFe Agile uses this pretzel logic and manipulation to crown themselves the king of our domain. SAFe has Lean UX's blessing to control us. SAFe also says, quote, Decentralizing decision-making provides additional guidance for the Lean UX process. Agile teams are empowered to do collaborative UX design and implementation. And that significantly improves business outcomes and time to market. End quote. The ghost of my slide from episode 115 about biases and logical fallacies should be floating over you. I've never been able to find any Agile coach or SAFe trainer who was able to give me the data they have that shows that engineering delaying their engineering work to do UX work significantly improves business outcomes and time to market. Nothing on their site explains how they arrived at that conclusion. But maybe they're being accidentally honest by cherry-picking what they claim their method improves. The business is happier when engineers guess at UX work and release quickly, hence the improved time to market. Remember that time to market means we got this out to the public fast. It doesn't mean it was right for customers, doesn't mean it was good, doesn't mean people were happy with it, doesn't mean it didn't cause our support team endless tickets, doesn't mean we didn't have to fix it later. Congratulations, SAFe Agile. You're fast, and you think that you're making the business happy. But without making customers happy, the business will eventually feel that pain and end up unhappy. SAFe has badly painted themselves into a corner, and I'm watching them start to try to undo what they've done. They released an article on human-centered design, which was written by 5 Agile coaches. I checked their LinkedIn profiles. None of them had any UX, HCD, or HCI education, training, or work experience. Not a day of CX or UX work experience. Agile coaches might slap each other on the back over this article, but I could tell from the article that they really didn't understand human-centered design. Still, if they can start pushing some sort of definition of HCD, they can move away from Lean UX and its author speaking out against them. I don't expect them to get this right, but I think more people are now watching them. Madalena says, I know examples of minor A/B tests that took 1 day to build and 1 month to go live due to business decisions. So the whole UX has easy grunt work anybody can do is really a fallacy. I have so much specialized CX and UX work on my plate that I wish I could give it to a product manager, a business analyst, or engineer, said no one ever. And we covered that in depth in part 1 in episode 115. You might be overworked, but you probably don't dream of non-UX people taking over some of your work. I'll talk later about how we should build our CX and UX teams to handle the real amount of work we have while improving our abilities to be agile and lean. Whether your workplace uses SAFe Agile or some other flavor, tell your Agile coaches, Scrum Masters, engineering leads, and others that CX and UX work and decisions can't be decentralized and shared by the whole Agile team. Our work is strategic, and our work affects company strategy, business intelligence, and risk mitigation. Our work has far-reaching impact considering it's the product, services, and details that we deliver to our trial and paying customers. It's what makes or breaks our company in our customers' eyes. This isn't a quick decision about should this be a radio button or a drop list. This is the product. These decisions have far-reaching impact. Our domain is outside of the scope, knowledge, and responsibility of a team of engineers. CX research, content strategy, information architecture, interaction design, testing, visual design, and copy are not engineering tasks. When engineers apply for jobs, they're not assessed for any of those skills. CX and UX are outside of the knowledge of most engineers. They would have to be taught and then have around 1,500 hours of work experience for our company to take them seriously. That was explained in Part 1, Episode 115. Using Safe Agile's own definition of what should and shouldn't be decentralized, CX and UX work and decisions cannot be decentralized. Therefore, Safe Agile Principle 9 or any other Agile principle cannot be twisted to declare control over CX or UX. If our work cannot be decentralized, engineering is not in charge of implementing UX. We are UX, we implement UX. Make sure you're standing up to all the bullshit. It's not going away on its own. It's time for us to push against this. But we're still expected to be more agile and more lean. So now that we know what those mean, what should we do? First, let me mention briefly that I'm recommending some new titles for all of us, all with the word CX, and we'll talk about that more later. But even if you keep the term UX, I suggest removing the word designer for people who are information architects, interaction designers, and service designers. When people hear designer, they hear pretty things, branding, and nice typography. But many of us don't do that and don't want people to assume we do. Architect is a better word. You will need to push to do dual or tri-track agile. These are easy to Google, so I won't go too deep. Dual track agile recognizes that trying to do CX, UX, design, or whatever you want to call it, along with engineering doesn't make any sense and isn't really possible. So the model says that we are discovery and engineering is delivery. We hand off work from time to time, but we collaborate with engineering and others often, both before and after this handoff. Tri-track Agile, quite simply, sees research on a separate track from design and architecture. The first track is working on research, strategies, opportunities, and the artifacts from research. These feed a second track, which is research-informed. They work on project or feature requirements, user stories, architecting and designing the product, and testing and improving it. And as that work is ready, it's fed into engineering sprints and their planning. This requires lots of planning. Engineering doesn't want to sit around with nothing to do, waiting for us. We must get better at estimating our time. We've got to estimate our time early in planning and at every phase. Don't let project managers guess what UX workers will do and how long they need. This is how we end up getting 2 days to guess at wireframes when we wish we had multiple sprints to properly go through user-centered design. Remember that Agile is for engineering. It doesn't tell marketing or sales how to work. It doesn't tell corporate strategists, executives, or research and development how to work. You can make a very logical argument that Agile should not be telling UX how to work. And that's really what dual and tri-track Agile show. They show us feeding the assembly line but not being controlled by engineering. Like all of these other disciplines that Agile doesn't control, we're just on our own track. We're collaborators, we're buddies, and we should have a representative on every team because engineers are building what we have architected. We want to show them our work as we go, not because we need their approval, but to make sure that we're creating something feasible for engineering. I don't know why Abi is LOLing at a CX data scientist. I think it is the wave of the future. That's your quantitative researcher. Don't pretzel your profession into what someone else's profession incorrectly thinks you should be doing. The most important thing you can do is start the conversations that will work towards the goal of getting CX and UX out from underneath engineering's control and into its own separate tracks. When marketing wants to do research, nobody cries that Agile says we have to democratize so engineering can do marketing research. When marketing wants to speak with target customers, Agile coaches don't show up and try to time box that into story points. When someone in sales wants to try to learn what their potential customer needs, no Scrum Master shows up and says, "We don't have time for that," or "That's not lean." The real solution is for us to get out from under engineering's control. And the first way we do that is by making sure that Agile coaches, Scrum Masters, engineering leads, and others related to this issue know that we don't care what their books and models say. Nobody is giving them power over our domain, our work, our specialists, or our decisions. Next, you will need project and team charters to help define the boundaries of what everybody's doing, which is a nice way of saying engineers, product managers, business analysts, and others are not doing CX and UX work, even if they think that would make it go faster. We should have plenty of cost-benefit analyses. You saw that in part 1, episode 115. The cost-benefit analyses show us where speed over quality has been the wrong choice nearly every time. They must understand that if somebody wants people, systems, competitors, and others researched, we're the go-to team. If something needs to be architected or designed, we're the go-to team. Nobody can sketch screens and make their own quickie solutions just to go fast. If you claim you're about collaboration, then you have to collaborate with us and not exclude us from our own work, as Agile so often does. Next, CX will need to build a serious department with qualified people and get close to that 1-to-1 ratio with engineering, which I'll be talking about soon. Engineering can be as agile, scrummy, Kanban-esque, extreme programming-ish, and anything they like. They get to choose how their world strategizes, plans, and operates, but they don't get to choose for us. Cut those strings immediately. We'll never get a seat at the table while we look like a pair of hands that engineering or product orders around. We will never have autonomy while we say yes to fake agile and fake lean controlling what we do. We'll never create great customer satisfaction while UX is thought of as easy to learn, easy to do tasks that everybody at our company can do. Seth says, let's go fast in the wrong direction. I know, you would think someone would notice by now that's not agile or lean. We often hear that UX isn't agile. Well, this is easily explained. Let's imagine a team of 4 developers and 2 QA professionals. They want 4 sprints of work, which would be 6 people who want 8 weeks of work. That's normal. We don't call that big engineering up front. But when UX wants 8 weeks to do something, this is sacrilegious. People clutch their pearls and cry that UX must be bloated, old-fashioned, and waterfall. We assign someone from UX to that team. At most companies where I've worked, my time was split between 3 projects. So not only does engineering expect something nearly immediately, but they expect it from 1/3 of a person. And at many companies I've worked at, there are maybe 4 UX researchers supporting every project the entire department is doing. I have to wait weeks for a researcher to be free if I need researcher testing. Sometimes this 1/3 of a person is expected to do everything: research, interpretation, competitive analysis, content strategy, information architecture, interaction design, visual design, and more. First, these jobs are completely unreasonable. Second, you're setting someone up for failure. There's no way a person can get all of that done well while being allocated around 10 hours per week on a project. This staffing imbalance is completely inefficient and will never be agile. As in, yes, they don't want us to hire. They don't want to let us do our work the way we want to. They don't want to give us time and resources. And then they bitch us out for not being agile enough. You can bitch us out if that makes you feel better. But we didn't create this situation. We were forced into it. It's time to force our way out of it. We must pursue a better way to work together and enhance agility. My Delta CX, Charlene says, I'm on a project where our main purpose is to support developers so they have work to do for each sprint. Right. My Delta CX model suggests that CX architects work in pairs. Even one 100% dedicated CX architect would be an upgrade from the 1/3 of a person some agile teams get now. But I'm recommending 2, they handle information architecture, interaction design, and prototyping. When hiring, we assess them for all of these skills, especially information architecture, knowledge, and abilities. Pretty screens on a crappy system can still make customers unhappy. Unhappy. Take that again. Your pair of CX architects will share one seat with the Agile team. Now you've got CX, UX, or your design skill on the team, as nearly every flavor of Agile suggests, except you have someone actually competent and efficient at it. It's also a good idea to double us up on projects, because I've had Agile coaches and Scrum Masters tell me that when UX goes on vacation, engineers will just do the UX work because it has to be done, and anybody can do it. If there are 2 CX architects on the project, then if one is sick or on vacation, the other can do the work. Engineers wouldn't get the opportunity to imagine that with no CX resource present in that moment, they can pick up our work. The CX architect pair has their own research team. Hire someone with 5 or more years of specialized research experience and team them up with 2 more junior or apprentice researchers. Don't hire research newbies alone without a very experienced person to lead and support them. Side note, I've got a model on my website for an apprenticeship program, so please create an apprenticeship program for CX architects and researchers, deltacx.com. I'm also hoping that in the future, the research team will have a dedicated data scientist. This person can focus on more of the quantitative research as well as creating models of customer behaviors. If you can get some data scientists now, that would be great. If not, for now, this model works without them. Then we have what I call the satellite team. This is your visual designer, copywriter, and any other specialists that projects need, but not really on a full-time basis. At most of my jobs, and especially with component libraries or design systems, a visual designer is really more needed, is more on an as-needed basis. Kanban-esque was something I said a few slides ago, ESQUE. So if we imagine that the architects and researchers are 100% allocated to whatever this Agile team is going to need to build, now you have a ratio of 5 CX architects and researchers to 6 engineers, all embedded on and dedicated to this team. Putting a larger and more specialized CX team on projects would allow them to be more efficient. Staffing up with highly qualified CX specialists has to be better than inefficient and wasteful guesses, hypotheses, beliefs, hopes, dreams, and retrofitting. Quick note, this model is different than what my book suggests. It's even an updated version from the HR training I published in April 2021. I do update my models from time to time, but it's hard to republish books or constantly re-record video training. So let's visualize this in case it helps you communicate this with non-UX teammates. I'll use a real project we're doing now at Delta CX. An e-commerce company wants 2 new concepts for their landing pages shoppers see when coming from Google Shopping ads. We started with research. That's right, we didn't just guess at 2 landing pages. We took the time to understand customers' criteria before they even start shopping, like decision-making criteria. We observed them shopping on Google, competitors' websites, and our clients' websites. We recruited people who've shopped on our client's site before and people who've never seen the site before. We have a mountain of business intelligence that will help this company strategize and prioritize a variety of ideas and features. Since it was observational research with 27 participants, we now have enough data and insights to fix a lot of areas of the website, not just the landing pages. That means for some future projects, we won't need to do research again. We did it already. Smart planning. So we spent 370 hours on research. I'm estimating around 210 hours for 2 landing page designs and some rounds of testing and improvements. Now, if you put a jack of all unicorns on this, that's 19 weeks of work. Of course, that's not agile. product and engineering will ask you to cut corners and get them something fast. Note that I calculate based on a 30-hour work week. 40 hours minus lunch and breaks equals 30 hours of real work each week. Now, put my suggested team on this. 3 researchers sharing 370 hours of work could get that done in about 4 weeks. For the landing pages themselves, it's me, plus I gave 2 apprentices 1 landing page each. I was coaching them daily. But let's imagine 2 architects working full-time on this. It would take around 4 weeks. Looking back at your unicorn, you might like the idea of hybrids or generalists who can research and design, but this ends up a bit waterfall and high risk to have everything relying on one person and their health and availability. With this model, while researchers are doing thing B, architects are doing thing A. We have a more efficient assembly line rather than waiting for one person to do the whole assembly line themselves. So 4 weeks for research and 4 weeks for architecture and design and iteration, 8 weeks total. Where have I heard that number before? Oh yeah, remember when engineers wanted 8 weeks to do something and that was normal? Normalize UX needing 8 weeks to do something. And now, after this, if CX architects have 4 weeks of work on another feature before it's ready for engineering to build, that means we've got to be at least 2 sprints ahead. We should be at least 4 sprints ahead, especially if we need research or our testing proves we need more iterations. This should be doable in Agile. And if we have a really huge feature or something requiring fresh research, we just have to plan for this. That's all this really needs, planning. If you plan for UX to get the time we need to do our jobs well, then engineering will expect our work when we said we would deliver it. So where would companies get the budget for all of these new, well-qualified UX practitioners? Well, we talked about that a bit in Part 1, Episode 115. But you'd also get it from what you save in engineering rework, customer support not having to help people so much, and sales enjoying, attracting, and retaining more customers. If marketing has to spend more money promoting a mediocre product, they would save money when our product is a better natural match to customers. Investing in CX helps you identify and reduce cycles of waste. You're also saving the salaries of all the non-UX people trying to get training in UX and then guess at UX work. I showed you that in episode 115. You could spend $500,000 trying to train non-UX workers and then have them try to do our tasks. Or we can spend that money on 6 well-qualified practitioners who would work efficiently and wouldn't be guessing. You will save on all of the costs of poor quality when you release a better product in the first place. I have a slide coming up on the costs of poor quality. Seth says, how would you sell the money of the additional headcount? Oh, you read my mind. So great. Yeah, I think there's a 20-second delay. I promise I'll get there. If we can staff up at a 1-to-1 ratio or close to it, UX will be faster, more efficient, and more productive than we are now, which means we've been gaslit a lot about not being agile. The next time someone tells me UX isn't agile, I'm going to tell them, let me team up at least 5 architects and researchers, give me 4 2-week sprints, and then tell me we're not agile. Inside the UX department, we must do a better job creating jobs that are more specialized. Stop asking for jacks of all unicorns. Assess candidates for every skill we're asking for. If you're asking for 10 UX skills and you only check if people make pretty screens, you are not correctly assessing candidates. Just because a resume says people do qualitative research doesn't mean they do it properly or well. Not everybody claiming any particular skill is actually any good at it. And I recently released a completely free video training course for HR recruiters and hiring managers to learn how to attract and retain CX and UX talent. Please feel free to watch that and or share it with someone who needs to better understand what we do so they can create better jobs. You can find it at the web address deltacx.academy. Just to drive home the ideas I've just shared, and get your emojis ready, let's take a look at the type of propaganda we've been getting and believing for too long. This is the opposite of my advice. This is Jared Spool trying to sell you on his 2021 training that he calls Taking Control of Agile UX. Spool is the same guy who wants to come train your company so that everyone can be fluent in UX design. He's all for democratization and everybody's a designer. He loves lean UX. These are some of the many reasons he and I are the opposite of friends. Before I start, make sure you are thinking about the slide from Part 1, Episode 115, about cognitive biases, logical fallacies, and manipulation. Get your critical thinking hats on. Okay, here we go. In plugging his Agile UX training, Jared Spool says, quote, "The biggest irony of the shift to Agile is that it's exactly what the UX world has been seeking for years." End quote. Really? I don't think of Agile as exactly what the UX world has wanted. I've already told you how Agile unfortunately decided it controls us and our work and how we need to get away from that. Which aspect of Agile is exactly what we wanted? Or does Spool assume you will just read that and take it as fact without critical thinking? Agile is how engineering wants engineering to work, so I wasn't waiting for anything related to that. We also know that Agile is not CX's dream because left to our own, especially at agencies and consultancies, we don't choose to operate the CX department using anything that looks anything like Agile or Scrum. We don't think in sprints or the Fibonacci sequence. And I didn't need Agile Manifesto Principle 1 to convince me that my highest priority is customer satisfaction. Spool continues by saying, quote, "We can squeeze all of our design work into some sort of sprint zero phase, but that just seems to get people upset because it reinvents big design up front, something the Agile movement is desperately trying to get us away from." End quote. I already debunked big design up front 15 slides ago. Why do we care that Agile is trying to get us away from researching and designing before engineering builds? Our work comes first on the assembly line. Spool should be fighting the negative framing term big design up front, which is designed to make people think negatively about the time and resources we need to do our best work. Spool should not be jumping on the bandwagon and sounding like, "Yep, we gotta stop doing all this work up front." No, he doesn't have a Western accent from the 1800s. I can't remember what accent he has because we don't talk to each other. I know he lives in Boston, but I don't want to do a Boston accent. Itan says, "Sprint Zero, I didn't study for 6 years for Sprint Zero." Jared then says, quote, "Our challenge is to learn what we can about this Agile world and start to adapt to it." End quote. Anybody else flashing back to Saturday Night Live's unfrozen caveman lawyer? Your world frightens me. I'm not sure what rock Spool is living under, but we've all been adapting to workplaces with Agile for years. Some of us have been in Agile environments for 10 years or more. This isn't new. We adapted and it didn't work for us, our process, or our customers. We have to stop submissively adapting and pretzeling ourselves into what we hope will make engineers happy. Now we have to change and improve processes, which Agile technically claims they would want us to do. I'm very sad to report that Spool then says, quote, "We have to cut our designs into chunks while ensuring that it feels like a coherent, well-thought-out design after all the pieces fit together." End quote. Wait, what? Do you actually think we have to cut our design into chunks to make Agile happy? Does he think that's mainly what's going wrong? That we haven't chunked design enough? Does Jared Spool understand that Agile is about so much more than whether something was done in a sprint's amount of time or not? He seems really focused on just trying to change our timing and making us work faster. And it wouldn't be Spool if he didn't steal something from me. My presentation to Engineering, Agile, Lean, and DevOps conferences is called Improving Agility by Using Customers' Definitions of Quality and Done. I talk about bringing customer-centricity into Agile, partially through looking at how Agile teams define the quality of the product and the definition of done. I've even done that one on the YouTube channel, though it's already been rewritten and needs to be re-recorded. Spool's so-called Agile training says that you should, quote, transform your team's definition of done to be human-centered, end quote. If we transformed the definition of done to be human-centered, we wouldn't need to chunk our work and run screaming from what engineering wants to call big design up front. They'd respect what we do and give us the time and resources to do it well, which is what I want for you and what I think you want for you. Separately from this training, Spool is promoting a separate presentation about big design up front, which he claims is about how to build time into the Agile process to do our design work up front. Well, which is it? Cut our design into chunks? Get away from big design up front like the Agile movement wants? Pick a lane and swim in it, Spool. There was more garbage in his offering, but let's just skip to the end. Given Spool's foolish advice, I can never decide if I wished he stole more from me or less from me. But one thing that should stand out to you at this point of my presentation is that his advice is fairly opposite from mine. He's not helping you take control of Agile at all. He's calling it take control, and then it's really about adapting and changing what we do. That sounds more like being controlled than taking control. For all of the CX and UX pros badly struggling with Agile at your jobs now, Spool's advice probably won't help you, since it's just keep changing to be more like how engineering wants you to be. So from these two very different sets of advice, how can you tell which one is better? Which one's the better way to go? Use your critical thinking. Ask yourself which set of advice is better for customer outcomes. Which advice will make my job more like what I wish it were? Which will lead to more understanding of UX and respect for it? Which one gives us power and autonomy over our own domain? And which one tells us to just keep pretzeling ourselves into what other people think our work should look like? If we go with Spool's ideas, engineering will learn we are more eager than ever to fit into their unreasonable timeframes and let everybody guess at specialized UX research work. I can save you a lot of time and money. If you want to do what engineers tell you to do, you don't need Spool's training. Just say nothing at your jobs and watch everybody expect you to work in sprints and start the project days before engineering expects your final design. Sorry, no time for research or testing. Say nothing at your job and adapt to work like engineers. Let engineers do your work, let anybody do research. But this scenario is what we already have. So many of you are writing to me, writing to the Slack workspace and asking questions on the YouTube shows because you don't want this. You leave jobs because of this culture and process. You wish you could find the job not treating customers, UX, and you like this. Seth says, chunks? Wow. That chunking mess where it feels like a well-thought-out design afterwards feels like the guesswork of the absolute worst kind. I've got a little bit more advice. In the old days when we had some new screens we wireframed or prototyped, we worked in medium fidelity. If we were the visual designer, then we had to take a pass at the appearance. If someone else were the visual designer, we had to pass our work to them for them to spend some time applying the look and branding. This was another stop on the assembly line of the CX workflow. One way that we can save time and be more efficient is to use a design system, component library, style guide, UI kit, or whatever you're calling it. This way you can work in medium fidelity if you prefer, like I do, or you can work in high fidelity because all of the visual design of the components has already been created and agreed upon. Therefore, it's important for your department or company to undertake a project to create a design system with full attention to accessibility. You don't want to find out later that your colors don't pass color contrast standards or are not colorblind friendly. You also don't want there to be visual design inconsistency across anybody working on this product. Where a client has a design system or a component library, I will sometimes build that into my Acture file as a library so that I'm working right away in high fidelity. hashtag not sponsored, you should be able to build styles into whatever tool you're using. Earlier in the workshop, which was really last week's part 1, episode 115, we talked about running a risk mitigation workshop. Even if you can't run a workshop, you can and should still document every risk to a project. Follow the spreadsheet I created for the workshop. You can then identify the risk as well as root causes if you know those. Those might be assumptions people are making, unknowns, or knowledge gap that you or the team has. You can then detail the possible outcomes that could affect the company or the project internally, as well as customers or the public externally. You can give these scores for probability as well as internal or external severity. The rest of the columns in the spreadsheet help the team decide who will own the risk, how it'll be monitored and measured, and the signs we're looking for that show that the risk has been eliminated or greatly reduced. If these are not relevant to your documentation, you could leave them out, but at the very least, you want to document possible risks, even ones that might seem less likely. Remember to document risk in every possible form in which it might appear. This could be wasted time and effort by any team member. It could be guesses, assumptions, or untested hypotheses. It could be working based on assumptions. It could be your team insisting on continuing with a flawed project, even where team members have raised concerns about the quality, value, benefit, or other things to customers. It could be anything that appears to run against Agile or Lean. It could be the information you have that shows that the solution the team is moving forward with is not the correct solution. Risk mitigation and management are very important, especially when speaking the business's language. Therefore, it's the right thing to do and might possibly help you later when teams look back at the project and try to understand what went wrong. If you don't document this, you might find yourself later saying, "Remember when I said something like this could happen?" And everybody goes, "No, we don't remember that at all." Don't rely on everybody's memories. Make sure this has been documented and added to appropriate project files. Note that this is very much about teamwork and the entire team accepting blame or responsibility where something has gone wrong. You want to do your best to not point out any individual person unless it's absolutely necessary. For example, instead of saying that the project manager refused to give you the time you needed to test your designs, you can use passive voice and say you were not given the time you required to test your designs without naming names. A sign that this risk is reduced or eliminated would be that in the future, anybody planning a project is coming to you way before the project starts so that you can estimate the time and resources you need to do your best work. This documentation then belongs with the rest of the project documentation. For many companies, this will be in some sort of internal wiki like Confluence. Don't hide this in a Trello board or a tool that only the UX team sees. This is documentation about the project, and it should go where other documentation about the project lives. Hopefully there's a risk register. If your project or team uses a risk register or project management software that stores and tracks risks, you definitely want this to go there. If a risk score is very high, you might want to try to get the attention of a stakeholder to see if you can put some risk mitigation measures or tasks into play before the project continues on its troubling path. Seth says memory is unreliable when people are trying to cover their asses. Yeah, people suddenly get very forgetful. Each Agile sprint is supposed to end with a retrospective, commonly called a retro. The entire team, which should include you, meets to discuss 3 main questions. What went well? What could be improved? And what are we committed to changing for the future? Sometimes there's more questions. This is highly important considering Agile's commitment to self-managing teams who are always seeking to improve efficiency and teamwork. By the end of this meeting, team members are supposed to have made commitments that are actionable, and they're supposed to be held responsible for following through. This means that you want to be present at the retrospective and you want to be involved in these exercises. If any of the risks that you predicted came true in small, medium, or large ways, you should make sure to bring this up. Remember, the core of Lean is about reducing waste, and the core of Agile is about empowering self-managing teams to continuously improve. Therefore, hypothetically, your discussion of risk, and especially any risks that ended up happening, is relevant. What do we need to do instead of traditional UX evangelism? Well, let's start with better collaboration. I like to say that you will go much farther being an important part of the team than you will by holding another evangelism meeting about how you should be an important part of the team. We spend so much time talking about empathy, putting ourselves in other people's shoes, researching experiences and designing for them. And then we don't do that for our own teammates. We don't consider that they don't want to hear a UX evangelism presentation. We don't consider what they need from us, what their experience is. Why are our teammates so dissatisfied or pissed off at us? What is their job like when we disappear and don't communicate? What does your product manager, developer, and QA engineers need from you? Don't imagine. Find out. We should be using our CX abilities to architect a coworker experience that matches everybody's needs. People come up to me after my talks to complain that CX and UX teammates disappear into a black box for weeks or months. They slap a finalized design on developers and are never heard from again. Sometimes engineers receive designs they can't build, and nobody collaborated with them earlier to talk about technical limitations and requirements. We have to stop doing that. Many CX workers avoid engineers, probably because it's less than no fun trying to work with the people often thinking the least of you or trying to control you. But the best way to change that relationship is to keep showing up, keep being involved, collaborate, ask them questions early in the process, show them work as you go. Give cross-functional teammates all the documents that are fit to be passed around outside the all the documents that are fit to be passed around outside the CX team. Show them CX research videos, clip montages, task analyses, customer feedback, your information architecture process, etc. Not because you need their approval, but it'll really help if they see what you're really working on other than drawing boxes on a page. Get tools in place. Tools for communication, sharing concepts, sharing documentation, sharing designs and specs. Ask for tickets in Jira if that's what they're using, or whatever they're using. Don't settle for a Trello board of UX issues if they're all in Jira. You're on the team and you should be part of the communication and documentation system. Make engineering questions and issues high priority, top priority. Teach them they can count on you to provide fast, thorough answers. When those tickets come in, I try to drop everything. I'm now their bottleneck. One might say I'm blocking the Agile team, so I can't say, oh, I'll answer them tomorrow. This screenshot is me responding to a QA lead 2 minutes after he tagged me in a ticket. Do that. If we only show up to meetings to fight or evangelize and never show up to bring positivity, help, improvement, discussion, or collaboration, then other people get a very one-sided impression of CX. Ask to be invited to the recurring and random team meetings. Go to as many of these as you can in your schedule. If you're allocated 100%, you shouldn't have a problem making most or all of these team meetings. You're probably thinking, more meetings? No, thank you. I go to them and I tell them I'm multitasking. I'm half listening and I'm working on other things. If you need me, get my attention. If you're not there, there's a huge chance that they will decide on something or change something about the product without consulting you. If you are there, even half there, they're more likely to turn to you and include you. Part of being a better teammate is doing better research and testing, especially when we're not given a lot of time to do it. At low maturity companies, research can be slippery. I've had 2 people recently show me their research plans. One was going to interview people about where on a website the users would like more how-tos. The other was going to have people look at the app's new onboarding tutorial screens, ask if they liked them, and ask what they remembered about them, something like that. I guess someone at that company thought it would be good if we could prove the onboarding is memorable 10 seconds after seeing it. Both of these make the newbie mistake of not being customer-centric. Customers don't want more how-tos. They want a site that's easier to use, logical, intuitive, just works the way they expect. Customers don't want more onboarding and more tutorials. They love to skip those. They want an app that's logical, intuitive, and easier to understand. How-tos, tutorials, tooltips, chatbots, and other help are band-aids on real usability problems. This means that it's a risk and a waste for our companies to build more help when we could spend the same time and money making the product easier to learn and use. This is where we have to be problem finders and critical thinkers. Testing is often also slippery. You start out with the goal of improving the website checkout. As an example, by the time someone is letting you do usability testing, they just want to know if people like it. Or they just want to know if people can eventually somehow make it through the checkout. Well, hold on. Your original project goal was probably not, can people just kind of sort of generally make it through the checkout? I often see testing tasks written incorrectly. They're normally written to try to say the design is good and check that box so we can move it to engineering. But we're testing it to find flaws and improve it before we ship garbage that customers have to struggle with. We don't want to write tests designed to validate the idea or make it seem good enough. We don't want to survey people on whether or not they like it or what score they would give it. We don't want to A/B test our way to a design or customer workflow. Look back at project goals and metrics. Was this project to simplify a checkout? Well, then we test for having simplified the checkout. It should be faster and easier for people to use. They should be making fewer mistakes. Warning, you're gonna need some resilience. I want to warn you that doing the work I'm suggesting you do isn't always going to be pretty and might not be received with welcoming hugs. Agile coaches and Scrum trainers can be very defensive about how their methodologies approach UX. Here's one story. An Agile coach was defending Safe Agile against the Lean UX author's scathing blog post about Safe Agile. The coach used pretzel logic and just about every logical fallacy in the book to try to say that they were doing UX and human-centered design very well. I replied to disagree, and I asked for specifics. Can you tell me step by step exactly how UX professionals and their processes fit into Safe Agile? And this was like 2 months ago. I gave them an example project of researching with customers and then improving website landing pages. Please tell me how great UX work gets done in Safe Agile framework. Who does the work? How is it estimated? Who makes final decisions? The Agile coach's first response was to demand that I provide hard numerical data proving that the UX community did not embrace the Lean UX book, which was something I had mentioned but wasn't my core question. He also asked me to detail all of the training I've done with Safe Agile. Notice that neither of those requests are relevant to my question, but he's trying to turn this around to be about me personally. And I certainly noticed that Safe is very comfortable treating their conclusions as fact without providing any hard numerical data. But for my question to have value, I need to prove that my industry rejected the Lean UX book. I told him I've done 4 days of Safe training in Colorado, but that shouldn't matter because my post said to pretend I know nothing about Safe Agile. Pretend I've never heard of it. I know zero. Just explain step by step how UX tasks and workers fit into Safe. The coach spent a lot of our back and forth on LinkedIn trying to discredit me and point at my lack of knowledge about Safe, which wasn't relevant, but I recognized it as the weak argument tactic that it was. When the coach realized that he wasn't going to be able to scare me off or discredit me, he posted this response. It's so batshit crazy and unprofessional that I'm going to read it out loud. Quote, Debbie Levitt, reading your multiple responses, I hear you saying the following, my view, not literally. 1, everyone else is wrong and you are right. 2, you are the only one that determines what is good. 3, all models are not only wrong, but none are useful, except maybe one that you create. 4, You are upset that no one wants to invite you into their process or follow what you say to do. For example, engineers overrule your decisions. 5. None except maybe your present gig is providing budget for UX. Did I get this right? End quote. That's designed to end the discussion. It's another manipulation trick that too many people fall for. Now, instead of talking about how poorly Safe Agile addresses UX, now we're talking about me. Most people would see this and start defending themselves. No, I'm not saying everybody is wrong and I'm right. No, I'm not saying all models are wrong, etc. We also have a common flawed argument, which I've not yet found the right term for, but appears to be some sort of gaslighting. It's when you reply to someone who has presented an argument unemotionally and you describe them as hurt, upset, or emotional. That's designed to minimize their points and make it seem like it was just an upset emotional rant. This poor unfortunate man wasn't even able to answer my simple question. An agile coach who specializes in SAFe couldn't answer my question. He wanted to attack me for even asking. This is why we can't have nice things. This is why our customers can't have nice things. And behavior like this shouldn't be acceptable in any workplace from any worker, contractor, or consultant. Can you imagine this conversation happening face to face in a meeting room? I have dozens of screenshots like this, possibly hundreds. Dozens from different agile coaches, scrum masters, and engineers around the world. I'm just warning you that when you start talking about how the emperor isn't wearing any clothes, you might find these argument tactics used against you. Ignore them. They are games and manipulations. Stick to the facts you have and the perspectives you can back up. Speak unemotionally. Avoid defending yourself or playing the game. Recognize when they have no good answer, so they go into attack mode, and then ignore the attack. Darren says his response was narcissistic and troll-oriented. Solomon says how condescending that was. Darren says also an act of deflection. Seth says, wow. Madalena says, wow, low blow. Oh yeah, and I've like 100 of these screenshots. So why aren't we seeing more people calling flavors of Agile out for their lack of customer centricity, their unreasonable control over the UX domain, and their belief that every engineer can do UX work well enough? We have to imagine the possible outcomes of the public realizing that the emperor isn't wearing any clothes. None of these have happened, but imagine and pretend for a moment. What if the author of the Lean Startup book came out and said he never intended for MVPs to be used by non-startups? What if Google didn't publicly support design sprints? What if companies who had the Lean UX authors come in and train them announced publicly that they dislike the training, aren't using the model, and don't recommend that other companies hire these trainers? That would be great. Instead, you're all writing to me privately. I wish you'd say something publicly so that companies can stop wasting time and money on these training events. What if it becomes generally agreed that design thinking has become meaningless and we should no longer pursue related books, training, or exercises? Safe Agile has design thinking written across their latest infographics. That would be a mess for them. What if Safe Agile, which completely adopted the Lean UX book, announced that their approach to UX was way off? They're not using Lean UX anymore, and they've got a completely different way that Agile should work with UX. These would all be awesome, but the outcomes for all of these hypotheticals is pretty much the same. Book sales crash. Previous workshops, seminars, trainings, and certifications are now somewhat or wholly meaningless. Trainers might look pretty bad for years of selling this garbage. Those who paid for training would question its value. Conferences may have to answer for why their program included or highlighted flawed techniques. Trust would be broken. Why were we sold poor processes as the best way to do things? Why is that best way being discontinued? Companies would be in shock and asking themselves what the heck they've been burning money on for years. Even Spool is afraid to go up against Agile. He pretends he's going to tell you how to take control over it, and then he teaches you to be a total doormat. The Lean UX authors have announced they will release a 3rd edition of their book. But I don't expect the book to change much, since that would be an admission that their previous model and approaches are as wrong and non-viable as they are. They would have to keep most things the same, or else they risk people noticing that the model was completely remodeled. Safe Agile is starting to wave more of an HCD flag than a Lean UX flag, but I expect them to fundamentally change very little. It's too risky for business models relying on selling expensive training to greatly evolve their models and have to face questions about why the approach presented in the previous expensive training was now the wrong way to do things. It's part of why all of these people don't want to be questioned. Just a quick time check for everybody. I do have more slides. I have about 30 more slides. I'm going to try to get through them in a half hour, but we are going to go quite late today. So if you can't finish, please do come back later. This is a multi-parter. Callie says, talk about fragile. So true. So how do we shift teams, departments, and hopefully our company towards customer centricity, especially if evangelism and aspirologies didn't work or backfired, and especially where everybody claims they want to be lean and agile? We often hear that UX is just not speaking the business's language. We think that's a call for us to evangelize more, explain ourselves more, and invite people to aspirology workshops. But it's not. It's people telling us that we're not giving them what they need, so it's hard for them to find value in us. Seth says, honestly, engineering is the darling in companies because they're closest to the end deliverable and they're seen as the makers of the thing. They hold a lot of sway politically. We still have to get out from under their control. Speaking the business language is simple. It's money. The business doesn't make money from empathy, delight, and maps claiming to diagram what users feel. Come sit in more workshops and try to learn the value of UX. Costs the company money without making the company money. It's all about the economics. Supply and demand. Comparing us to the competition, our pricing, what consumers prefer. This is why sales and marketing easily get monster budget. They are directly tied to these economic and financial factors. The business sees why they need engineers, product managers, and business analysts, so they get budget and respect. Those roles also tend to care nearly 100% about business goals. They usually love to make stakeholders happy, and every document they produce speaks the business's language. They claim to care about what consumers want or need, but it's often secondary to the business. The business and all of these teams therefore enjoy a symbiotic relationship. The business funds them, and they do what they can to create value for the business. The business makes money from very concrete things, and you will need to show how you fall into those money-saving and money-making categories. This is ROI. If we spend money on CX or UX in the form of salaries, tools, and the time we spend on a project, where does the company save money? Where do they make money? And how is this directly tied to us? You can find plenty of people writing and speaking about the importance of proving the ROI of UX and using metrics. If you can tie outcomes directly to us and everybody agrees we get the credit, that's great. But more often than not, it's a double fantasy. First, the fantasy that we're going to have accurate metrics that really measure improvements in the customer's experience and business outcomes, not time on a page or newsletter signups. Then we would have to show how we directly influence that. And it's not product or engineering or marketing. If the team takes credit for successes and we don't really get the credit, we might find this new form of UX metrics as evangelism isn't working either. Try it, but I wouldn't be surprised if one or both of those fantasies doesn't come true as often as we'd hope. We have to look at other ways to speak the business's language. Someone says, I'm sorry, I'm a dev engineering sitting in a UX team to work in the collaboration. Where does the idea come from that everybody doesn't want to collaborate with UX? If that's not true, this problem is deeper than they don't me. Okay, I'm a little bit lost in that comment, but I'm just lost in that comment. I'm going to move on. Tie everything you do to business intelligence and risk mitigation, plus anything you're able to tie to any of the money savers and money makers on the previous slides. Business intelligence allows companies to create better strategies, goals, and initiatives. They'll have the right information to make better decisions. Here's a common example. The company wants to sell more stuff on its website. The business goal of increasing revenue drives strategies that say we need to bring more people to the site and get them to buy more stuff. Let's say conversion is around 1%, meaning 1% of people who visit the site actually buy something. So the business gives marketing money to improve SEO and increase the budget for paid Google ads. Various decisions are made and put into action as initiatives. What happens if this doesn't achieve the revenue goal? What happens if conversion is still 1%? What happens if the revenue we bring in is less than we spent in SEO and paid search efforts? Now compare this to CX as business intelligence. The business has a goal of increasing revenue and improving your sad 1% conversion rate. We plan a research project to give ourselves and other departments all the information the business will need to come up with the best strategies, initiatives, and decisions around achieving these goals. If we imagine this is 8 weeks of work for one lead researcher and 2 juniors or apprentices, and we use the pay rates that I mentioned in episode 115, that's an investment of $57,000 plus any research tools and participant incentives. Perhaps our observational research teaches us how people shop for items like ours, where they trust us and where we kill that trust, where our search end results stink, and how our product page can lose people, why they abandon the cart and checkout. This is a mountain of business intelligence that will fuel multiple projects within the company, and maybe it costs us $57,000. Our research can also help us prioritize projects. If we find that the product page is way more disastrous than the cart and checkout, we can show video clips and data that back that up. Perhaps the cart and checkout seem like a faster and easier project, but if the product page sucks and most people will see the product page, it's better to prioritize the product page. We can also advise marketing that it's not worth increasing SEO or paid search efforts until these aspects of the website are improved. Bringing more people to a poor website is likely to have limited success and might cost more than it's worth. This is why we have to solidify CX's place in processes way before we're planning products and features, way before we're making wireframes and prototypes. Those might go in the wrong direction without our business intelligence. In order to deliver business intelligence, risk identification, and risk mitigation, we must focus our teams, projects, and our company on customer centricity and accountability. Good news! Nearly every company already claims to want these. You have nothing to sell, nothing to evangelize, nothing that they don't already think they want. Part of customer centricity is the research that will deliver the business intelligence and risk identification. Creating better products and improving internal processes delivers on what we're promising. The trick will be to show leadership where they're falling short on these so we can create change. You will have to dig up some numbers and outcomes from projects that failed and delivered a poor customer experience. Start showcasing these lots of times as examples of wasted time, money, morale, customer trust, customer support, marketing dollars, sales efforts, and more. Showcase these as what happens when we aren't customer-centric. Of course, once you have projects that were truly customer-centric, you can showcase these as the successes they hopefully were. Seth says this is absolute gold, business intelligence and risk mitigation. Thank you, Seth. Let's tell Ray. And you know who else. When you are finding projects you will showcase as examples of when we weren't customer-centric, use the cost of poor quality from Lean Six Sigma. Lean Six Sigma sure speaks the business's language. I would suggest studying it at least a little. You don't need a certification. For the cost of poor quality, start with what the company spent internally on the project and all the time it took multiple teams. How about marketing costs and sales efforts? Did anybody write training on the features? What did it cost us to delay and fix things? You can start to imagine all of the time and money spent internally on this project, plus external costs. You might need to work with someone from customer support to see what complaints, tickets, or issues they have about this product's features. Can we find numbers on customers who canceled or downgraded? Can we figure out the costs of MVPs and especially failed MVPs? Companies are sweeping the costs of poor quality under the rug, so they might not want you to shine the spotlight on it. Focus on agile, lean, improving efficiency, saving the company money, and improving customer satisfaction because everybody claims to want those. Document parts of projects that create any of these wastes or costs. Bring this up in retro. If it makes people angry at you, then they aren't agile. Agile is about constantly reflecting on how things went and then actively making improvements. When collecting data for your cost of poor quality and calculating what flawed and failed projects cost, remember to find public ratings and opinions. I use Philips Hue smart lights, #not-sponsored. They redid their app a few months ago and now it literally doesn't work. For months. Google's App Store shows many one-star ratings, all referencing the new app version. According to the ratings, the app is incredibly slow. That means it wouldn't fit engineering's definitions of quality. It certainly isn't an acceptable level of quality to our consumers. We also have UX complaints here, like it's taking more steps to accomplish the same task and features people liked were inexplicably removed. This reviewer said the new interface isn't practical. Daily tasks are a constant hassle and tasks are taking too long. 2 out of the 9 most recent one-star reviews specifically said their tasks are harder to accomplish. And this person wishes they could return all of their Philips Hue lights just because of how bad the new app is. What is the cost of having put this poor quality out there? How did the company benefit from rushing out a poor user experience and something engineering evidently didn't test enough? Who will be held accountable for this disaster? At most companies, the answer is nobody, and that's why we must focus also on accountability. Heads should roll when teams create a mess like this. This is also the difference between a feature-driven team or project and a task-driven team or project. A feature-driven team is often thinking about what can we make this do? Stakeholders might have ideas they think are cool or rip off the competition or sound like something good we should add to the product or service. We want to add more bells, more whistles, and hey, let's make the product do this. These ideas might also have come from aspirology workshops like design sprints. They might be possible solutions to poorly understood problems or the wrong problem. When we are task-oriented, we've taken the time to research our target customers. What's their decision-making process? What's their workflow? How do they do this now? Where's that working well for them? Where are their obstacles, tools, workarounds, or blockers? What knowledge did our system expect them to have versus what knowledge they actually have? We cover this in some detail in the Micro Lessons playlist on YouTube. Look for multiple videos on task analysis. Once you've done a proper task analysis, the opportunities and possible features almost jump up and punch you in the face. You are much deeper into the problems. You can solve for customers' workarounds, knowledge gaps, tools, blockers, or extra task steps. It's a very different approach or technique when compared to a more random, hey, what if we made the product do this thing? Time estimation. We want to be a larger part of early project discussions and planning. One reason this often falls apart is that when people ask us how long our work will take, we act like we have no idea. We act like our work is such a tremendous variable and unknown. There is no other domain or team acting like this. So once again, we look weird. Who are these people who can't even estimate their own time? We have to stop acting like our work is a freaking mystery. It's not. I'm at the point where I can estimate a CX project that will take 4 or 5 months, and my estimates for the entire project aren't off by more than a week. CX and UX managers and higher, you have no excuses. You are supposed to be strategic and able to estimate time well. Start working with project, program, portfolio, and whatever your company calls these people to make sure Our time and resource estimates are included in projects, hopefully months before engineering's expecting our wireframes. Quick question. Seth says, can you explain what you mean by aspirology? Yeah, I have a whole bunch of other videos. In short, aspirology is my catch-all made-up word for design sprints, design thinking, lean UX, democratization, decentralization, upskilling, training other people to do our jobs, designed by committee. My keys to getting better at time estimation are: track your time honestly. You can't learn how long something tends to take you if you're not really tracking every minute. Track the time you spent Googling that thing or sending that email. Track it all, and you will start to see how long certain tasks take you. Next, you have to include what I like to call predictable unforeseeables. You know something will go wrong. You don't know what, but you know it will. So you've got to pad your time estimates. You can't resource people 100% because what happens if you need a little bit more out of them? You can't go over 100%. Translate your units to whatever project managers and other planners use when estimating tasks and time. If they use hours or days, you're fine. If they use story points or sprints, those units can be translated to your hours or half days or full days. A 2-week sprint is going to be 10 business days or 60 work hours, accounting for breaks and lunches. Story points tend to be relative because estimating exact hours can be hard for engineers. Ask your team's Agile coach, Scrum Master, or engineering lead how they tend to measure story points. If a story point is a range of 10 to 20 hours of work, translate your estimates accordingly. Remember that we're on our own track, so we don't have to use engineering's units. You're being generous. Use whatever planners and project managers are using, which is probably days. I've been working on a time estimation spreadsheet. You can visit the read-only version at deltacx.link/estimation-sheet and make an editable copy for yourself. I started with research, but I hope to add architecture, design, and testing later this year. We're using this internally at Delta CX, and we reversed engineered and refined it based on some recent projects we did. Here's how this works. It's a little bit visual. Sorry to the audio-only people. N is the number of people you hope to observe or interview during research. That could be users, it could be stakeholders, whatever is your N. Here I'm imagining it's 12. Next, how long will each session be? 0.5 is a half hour, 1 is an hour, or any other number or fraction of an hour. Next, how many hours of video do you expect to end up having on average per session? For example, I find that when I book 1-hour sessions, I tend to end up with an average of 54 minutes of video. So I'm normally putting 1 for the session length and 0.9 for the hours of video. If you're not sure, use the same number as the session length. The next field asks if you want your numbers rounded up. For example, if you think in half days, then you want everything rounded up to 3 or 4 hour blocks. If you think in hours, maybe you put 1 in there. The next field asks how many hours of work you can do in a day before you're just fried. You want to imagine that you're working a 6 or 8 hour day, but let's face it, our work is sometimes so intense that we can't spend all day on it. Here on the sheet, I'm also starting to separate out what does the lead do and what does your assistant, junior, or apprentice do. Or this could be 2 equal people splitting work. Or it can be lots of people splitting work. Maybe, like I showed the dream team earlier, it's 1 lead and 2 assistants, juniors, or apprentices. But for now, just enter in how many hours of real work you can do per day before you are just done. Next, take a look at the percentage splits. Let's make sure I'm circling the right thing here. Between lead and assistants. This is my typical split. Note that this doesn't care how many leads or assistants you have. It's only the balance of time between them. If you're working alone, just put 100% for the lead for everything. Here's where I ask how many assistants you will have. Again, this spreadsheet currently assumes 1 lead and 1 or more assistants, juniors, or apprentices. I have this here since sometimes you can speed up tasks with a larger team, and sometimes throwing more people at something doesn't usually make it go faster. Now look back over at this column for my factors. This says that for every person we want to meet in an interview or observational session, how many hours of work for each task do you have? This is something you can change as you track your own time and compare it to how many research participants you have. You might find some correlation and be able to update these factors. We found a factor of 3 when doing note-taking, coding, tagging, and analysis work on interview videos. So for each hour of video, my team needed 3 hours. Observational research was slower because there was more to watch and notice. We used a factor of 5 for that. I also found that for me, writing a research report doesn't seem to change much depending upon how many participants I had, so I'm playing with different factors there. The sheet then multiplies things out and rounds them up using your rounding number, which here rounds up to 3. For example, if we have 12 interviews that run a half hour long and we need to analyze those, that's 3 hours for our lead and 27 hours for our assistant or assistants. That could be 27 hours for one person, but if you start thinking about that in calendar time, wow, 7 business days. That's a week and 2 more days. You could speed that up by having 2 assistants share that work. The sheet then turns the hours into business days. If the interview analysis is 3 hours for the lead, they can do that in 1 business day. If 27 hours will be split between 2 assistants, that's 13.5 hours each. If they can only work 4 hours per day before they're burnt out for the day, that's 4 days for 2 people each. How you map this on a calendar is up to you. Do your leads do work before, during, or after your assistants' work? I can't know that. I can only tell you your lead has 1 day of work and 2 assistants have 4 days of work each. But you should be able to now map this to business days. And it should be realistic because it's padding estimates by rounding everything up to 3-hour blocks and then rounding again when we assume a day of work only contains 4 hours. We also reverse engineered how many people we had to schedule to get the right number of people to show up and how many people we had to invite to get the right number to schedule. CX and customer-centricity. I saw this on LinkedIn in early July 2021, posted by a product owner. It's a Venn diagram showing a maybe 1/3 overlap between product and customers. The point of the diagram is to say that product managers exist in that overlap between product and customers, where UX tech and business overlap in a mini Venn diagram. The person who posted it said the diagram was missing a larger circle to indicate the market. But my question was, why isn't the Venn diagram of product and customers a completely overlapping circle? Does this diagram indicate that we have a lot of product and features that don't serve customers or meet their needs, and a lot of customers whose needs aren't addressed by our product? The product and features that don't match customers are risk we need to mitigate or waste we should cut. The needs that customers have that we're not aware of or not addressing are missing business intelligence that we should fill in. It's money left on the table. This is another opportunity for critical thinking. While many people might look at this infographic and love it or think it's just missing a circle to represent the entire market, with critical thinking, you can see something's very wrong with how much of our product and our customers are overlapping. This diagram isn't a celebration of product managers. It's a warning about mistakes our company is making that we're aware enough about to create a diagram like this. Once we understand customers' tasks and needs, we should architect and build for those. Perhaps an interesting 30-minute workshop meeting would be to bring everybody together on the cross-functional team. Have them draw a Venn diagram of our product and customers, or prepare a Miro board where each person has a circle for product and a circle for customers, and they just have to bring them together to create a Venn diagram. That should then open a nice discussion about where we have risk, where we're lacking information that would guide us towards better strategy and decisions, and where we're leaving money on the table. I'd love to see that workshop. That's like 30 minutes. Let's see, everybody. Oh, wait a minute. Why doesn't this crap overlap more? What are we doing wrong? In the old days, when what the customer needed didn't overlap what the business wanted to do or sell people, you built what the business wanted. You hired more marketing and salespeople to figure out how you were going to make people think they want this. Those are the dinosaur days, but they're not extinct just yet. Therefore, instead of our Venn diagram looking like customers' needs and business goals are on two distant islands, we must bring these together. That's not done by pushing customers into what we think we can sell them or what we can force them or trick them into doing. It's done by shifting business goals, strategies, and initiatives to match our customers. It's done by making customer centricity part of our strategy. It's done by CX and UX. I wrote a Medium article with a 2-year prediction that what we think of now as UX will split into 2 completely different disciplines. In short, I believe that we will not be able to convince all of our coworkers and leaders that UX is science, technique, risk management, business intelligence, and change. They think UX is artsy-fartsy hipsters sketching screens, and they treat us as such. We label them as low maturity, and that changes nothing. They basically want us to be production designers. If we continue down the path most of us and our workplaces are on, UX will mean production design. Hey, the project starts today and you get 2 days to come up with final wireframes. Or, we're giving UX 2 weeks, so week 1 will be a design sprint, and week 2 you can polish up the wireframes and we'll test it when it's live with paying customers. That's the world in which we are production designers. Call it UX UI, UI UX, or product design. Call it anything. It's UX as quick guessing so engineering can take it from here. The other path is where we are change agents, problem finders, and problem solvers. We provide business intelligence so companies and teams can improve their strategies, goals, and initiatives. We find and predict and mitigate risks to save the company time, money, and unwanted outcomes. We are grounded in proper research, and we believe that research informs everything we do. We believe in research informing everything the company does, from strategies to initiatives to projects. I believe that this will be called CX, the customer or consumer experience. Though I'm still brainstorming what else it might be called that nobody will be able to hijack later and pretend it means production design. More on that in a future episode. While UX is often thought as artsy-fartsy, siloed hipsters wireframing screens, customer experience is hot right now. Some people think marketing shapes the customer experience, but that perspective has started to broaden. The Disney Institute has training and events on CX and how you can learn from Disney Parks and Hotels' approaches to the best customer experiences. They're not talking about marketing. I'm seeing so much right now from very famous consulting companies about CX. Gartner has an article on their site called Redesign Your Website to Do What Your Customers Want. Woohoo! What do you know? Here are some more quotes from the Gartner site. 81% of marketers say their companies will compete on the basis of CX in 2 years. Most are destined to underdeliver. Address the 4 common mistakes that marketers should strive to avoid when looking to deliver value and making CX matter to leadership. Another quote. Customer experience, CX, leaders are often the change agents in their organizations. It's getting harder for marketing leaders to build customer confidence in their brands, increase customer satisfaction, and drive customer loyalty. Customer experience is key to exceeding your customers' expectations. They're addressing marketers, but they're not really talking about marketing. Forrester is also out there pushing customer experience. They interviewed me for one of their white papers on how to prioritize CX work. Their site says, quote, as a customer experience, CX leader, you rally your organization around customer needs. You dismantle old ways of working and build new ones through the introduction of CX-focused disciplines that drive up efficiencies, competencies, and ultimately deliver business results. That's not marketing. Both are promoting the ROI of CX and how leaders need to create change and drive strategies and initiatives that better match customers. They tend to be addressing marketing and marketing leaders, but that makes sense. If you have no CXO, and some companies don't even have a head of product, which branch with a C-level executive is supposed to care about outcomes for customers? Marketing may be the Trojan horse for these efforts and our best partner at this stage. Hopefully, we'll be able to build our own teams, have autonomy, and eventually our own C-level executive, the CXO, Chief Experience Officer. Seth says, sidebar, starting to hear a lot of airy-fairy marketing hipster nonsense parading as CX. I fear a similar fate as UX in this UX UI paradigm. Yes, that's why I think we might need an even more different term that can't be hijacked. I'm still working on what that is because I don't know what it will be. They just keep hijacking our terms, and it's honestly truly bizarre. I've been saying for years that one way to get a seat at the table is to partner with marketing. They've got budgets and lots of things we can improve that can be measured. We can make them look good and they'll make us look good. We'll have metrics and ROI from those tight partnerships. When I speak at marketing conferences, I remind them that we're marketing's customer intelligence team. Don't guess at why people aren't converting from trial to paid, why conversions are low, and how our potential customers compare and decide. Surveys and scores don't tell us what's really going right or wrong. We can tell you who, what, how, why, and more so that marketing can strategize better and more efficiently. Plus, a better product is cheaper and easier to market than the garbage most companies release. Working closely with marketing makes it more likely that we will get the credit for achieving their goals. Here's how to make Agile truly customer-centric. Step 1, build a world-class CX team of well-qualified practitioners. Don't forget my free training program for HR recruiters and hiring managers. It might help. And see episode 115 because we discussed the many reasons why we must build our departments rather than try to train coworkers to stab at our jobs. 2, we're often told we don't speak the business's language. We care about the business, but we often feel like we're the only ones who care about the customers. When everybody is customer-centric, CX and UX won't look like lone weirdos we assume of not speaking the business's language. We need more people to speak the customer's language. 3, CX is part of our strategic approach to product. Start with research and solid knowledge on all the people who will use or interact with this product in any way. Then, CX are collaborators to help shepherd customer value in requirements and stories. CX estimates their own time early in project planning, way before kickoff. And we get that time because people who care about Agile, Lean, and customer satisfaction recognize that getting our product right earlier pays off in time, money, morale, and more. 4, shift away from broken models, processes, and aspirologies. The MVP is broken, but nobody has the guts to kill it. Scrum.org has an article saying the MVP would be improved by calling it minimal inspectable increment. That's not customer-centric. It shows that old ways need complete reinvention, not slight renaming. Customers don't want something to be minimally anything. Stop holding aspirology workshops glorifying guessing, and stop building MVPs. 5, it doesn't ship if our target customers wouldn't see it as 5-star quality. Cut lean waste early, scrap bad concepts before they're built. Product doesn't ship if it's not completely intuitive, usable, and accessible by all customers. 6, don't let Agile force CX to work the way engineering wants engineering to work. No model should require that every domain operate the way one domain has chosen to run their own ship. CX and UX have autonomy and are not controlled by any other department or domain. 7, one CX practitioner, or preferably a paired CX architect team, as my model suggests, is on the Agile or Scrum feature team, not as an outside consultant you talk to when you're not sure where to put a button. Putting us on the team breaks down silos. Make sure there are project and team charters so everybody knows what each person's responsible for and what each role's boundaries are. 8, every CX worker must be held accountable for their work and their part of a project. When a project experiences failure or customers are complaining, we have to look at where all of us failed. The side effects of holding CX workers accountable include removing or reassigning people who are unqualified or doing a poor job. Someone who's trying to fake it until they make it won't last long at your company if you're holding them accountable. Your workplace probably fires people who do a bad job, but few companies are firing a CX worker for doing CX work badly. It should be possible to lose your job by doing your job badly when you are getting the time, budget, and resources you would need to do your job well. If they're not giving us the time, budget, headcount, or resources to do our jobs well, this would come to light when we're held accountable, and someone would have to do something to improve that. If we were held accountable, bye-bye workshops and just have empathy and guessing at how the product looks and works. Heads would roll when we didn't innovate in these workshops, or when customers complain about the solution the workshop decided we'd build. Unqualified people would not want to guess at my work. Non-CX roles would not want to run the risk of interviewing customers badly or sketching terrible screens. If we held those people accountable for crappy screens, they might want to leave our work to us. Very often, product managers, engineers, and others want to make CX decisions or overrule our decisions. Hold them accountable for these decisions. If they make a decision that leads to customer dissatisfaction, poor ratings, more support tickets, customers leaving, etc., heads should roll. Philips Hue app department. All of these individually and together would improve culture and collaboration. Sorry, everybody, about 8 more slides, I think. So where do we start? Move away from evangelizing UX, and you need to understand what I do, and do you want UX or UI because they're not the same? Nobody cares. And this isn't about you, and doesn't anybody understand your job. You need to be a low-ego action hero. Stop talking about delight, empathy, and things that sound really emotional, touchy-feely, or woo-woo. This is a business that wants to make money. We sound like we're on another planet when we use these words. Ultimately, customers will be delighted if we understand their tasks and needs and build what improves those. Delight is the side effect, not the goal. Focus on business intelligence, risk mitigation, customer centricity, customer satisfaction, and accountability, because everybody claims to want those. Now you have that in common. Start there. Talk about how our company might be focused on competitive intelligence, but customer intelligence is part of business intelligence. You can't create the right business strategies or initiatives if you don't fully understand what customers' needs and tasks are. Once you have full intel on that, then you can see how you balance that with other business goals. We typically say yes to everything because we don't think we can say no. There's no other domain that is controlled by engineering, and there's no reason why we should be controlled by engineering. Who said we have to say yes to everything, especially unreasonable requests and timeframes? Who said we have to say yes to people trying to change the very nature of our jobs and why we were hired? It's okay to say no. It's okay to say, that amount of time is unreasonable. You should have planned this with me so I could have estimated my own time. It's okay to say, no, we need to do research here because we are providing business intelligence, trying to minimize risks, and maximizing customer satisfaction. No, engineering is not allowed to control what UX does, how they do it, who does it, and in what amount of time. Just no. If your company doesn't care about customer centricity, then anything goes. Any worker from any domain does whatever they think UX work looks like. People will pretend that's working until someone starts showcasing the true costs of the disaster projects. If your company cares about customer centricity, then they have to give UX the time, budget, and headcount they need to do great work. A good follow-up to saying no is, let's document that as a risk, and then do that. Be more lean and agile by only doing things that are meaningful, actionable, and helpful. For example, cut any work or artifact that isn't actionable. Did you make an empathy map where you had the ego to imagine you really know what another human being is thinking or feeling? Did that empathy map influence your design? Was it business intelligence that guided strategies and projects? No? Then get rid of it. Did you guess at personas and mostly use marketing demographics? Is this persona 80% nice, a Starbucks fan, and has the Myers-Briggs typology INFP? Will you architect and design differently for someone who's not nice or a different typology? Of course not. You are architecting and designing based on human tasks. Get rid of meaningless personas that aren't actionable. Make actionable personas based on the task analysis I talked about, or don't bother with personas. I use 0 frameworks, canvases, or templates. 0. If you put on your critical thinking hat, you'll see that most of these canvases don't even make sense. For example, why does the Lean UX canvas start by asking the business problem? Don't we care about the customer's problems? That's not even on the canvas. How are we deciding business outcomes and user outcomes when we're still in hypothesis mode? The Lean UX canvas was heavily borrowed from the Lean business model canvas, but we're not creating our company's business model. And why can't any of these people create a canvas where the boxes are in order? Keep your critical thinking hats on when you see all of these canvases, frameworks, and forms. We are not going to help ourselves be better understood or respected if we show our coworkers that we spend time creating all of this documentation that doesn't even help later phases and tasks in our own user-centered design process. We are unlikely to be better understood if we appear to do the UX by filling in templates. Double check everything you plan to do or work on. Is it meaningful, actionable, or helpful? Check everything for whether or not it adds to business intelligence and risk identification or mitigation. If not, then it's probably lean waste you should cut. Use everything you want from the Delta CX universe. Hit the deltacx.com website. I have lots of pages there with some of my models and methodologies, as well as info on the coaching, consulting, and fractional CX lead and CXO options we've got. We're a full-service agency. We take on projects. If your company doesn't want to hire but will budget for an outside agency, maybe we can do a project and show them how this is really done and the customer-centric value of it. More importantly, people like things with catchy names. If it helps you at all, you can call anything high quality that you're doing Delta CX. If someone Googles that, they'll find my website, models, books, etc., so you won't be making it up. If you need a catchy name for what you're doing, tell them you're doing Delta CX. Tell them Delta CX is about creating better customer outcomes by utilizing CX and UX specialties for business intelligence, risk mitigation, better product market fit, and reducing waste and guesses. Delta CX is about being grounded in proper research, user-centered design, playing to workers' strengths and specialties, growing our department, and reclaiming our autonomy. Everybody wins. I have spent nearly 2 years putting out as much free content as I can on this YouTube channel. The Aspirologies playlist should help a bit. Check the conference sessions playlist. Find episode 109 in the live stream podcast playlist, though I plan to post a new version of that presentation hopefully this summer. It's a start. It's my improving agility by using customers' definitions of done and quality. Don't forget every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. I do office hours Ask Me Anything for an hour. I even have a way for you to submit a question anonymously in case you want to talk about your real job. Join our Slack workspace. We've got almost 800 people there now. Some are quite active. I'd say about 100 are active. We help each other. I'm helping there too. deltacx.link/join Slack. Of course, subscribe here on YouTube. Since it's been easy for me to do an hour talk, some Q&A, or a combination of the two remotely without traveling, I've been offering some companies my time for free. Some have paid. Thank you. But if you think me talking to your company can help, let's arrange that. I find from speaking at engineering conferences that people are really confused about how to make their processes more customer-centric, and they're afraid of how taking the time to build something better will hurt agility. I explain how it helps agility, and I remind them that no one else is going to tell them this. Their agile coaches and scrum masters aren't experts in CX or UX, and nearly zero agile models correctly address customer centricity. You can also create a watch party with this episode and previous episode 115, but watch them in order, 115, 116. That's about 4.5 hours of content, but it should hopefully open some fresh conversations and push some boats out. Just tell me what you need. Find me privately and tell me what's going on. We'll come up with a plan to attack it. I had a call last week with someone who wanted tips on getting his team away from UX workshops now that he sees they don't really work and they make people think they can do his work. Whatever your question is, let's find some answers. Contact me and tell me what's going on in your world. UX maturity is really customer centricity. If your team doesn't care about customers or likes to guess about them, your org is typically low maturity. When your company truly cares about customers and believes in taking time for good qualitative research and feeding those insights into strategies, initiatives, products, projects, etc., then it's high maturity. Don't settle for what Agile or Lean have become or how they've been implemented at your company. Agile is often implemented poorly, and even when it's implemented well, it defines quality as code with few or no bugs that's ready to release. It's speed over customer quality and value. We guess and hope that in weeks or months we'll learn that what we did actually had value. How depressing. All of this is high waste. Not lean, not agile. And the more you can understand this and speak this language, the more likely you are to get somewhere in your organization. Quality code for a bad feature that doesn't match customers' needs or tasks is the wrong way to go. Putting band-aids on symptoms without fixing core problems is the wrong way to go and goes completely against the foundations of Lean. Please try using everything I've been talking about today and the additional things you can learn when you Google some of the concepts I've shown you. And then you can try to get more understanding and respect for CX and UX. If you have advocates that understand the value of UX, and even if they don't, but they claim to care about customer centricity, that's your lifeline. It's your sponsor. Find the people whose jobs are supposed to be customer-centric. They're often in marketing. Whoever they are, these are the people you have to work with strategically. Don't get lost at the tactical level of product isn't letting us do enough research, or engineering doesn't know what UX is. You have to work with these sponsors on a much higher strategic level. Your directors or whoever is the highest level person you have with a CX or UX title must proactively and frequently work with these advocates and sponsors strategically on how to mitigate risk, how to cut the waste from processes, how to improve a poor work culture, and how to bring customer centricity into all departments and levels of projects. If you work strategically on those, the tactics will follow. Strategy first. Your strategies will include getting everybody on the same page about the definition of quality. What's quality? How do we know when it's time for our company to release something? How do we know when it's time for our company to spend a little more time on it because it's still low quality? How do we understand and measure this internally so that our process tells us when something is done or not yet done? You have to go high level, or executive sponsors and advocates. You've got to go to these people with a strategic and tactical plan. You can't go to them and say, we need to be more customer-centric. What do we do now? You must have a detailed plan so that you are asking specifically for action and change. UX directors and higher, you are supposed to be able to create those strategies and plans. I'm not familiar with your particular org, so I don't mean to insult everybody or anybody when I say this. But if for any reason you don't have leaders in place who can create these strategies and plans, I can help. It's what I do. And if you have these people, get on it. The end. We made it. Only 2 hours and 20 minutes. Thanks to everybody who stuck with me today or is watching this later on. Or, oops, wrong window. Hold on. That's my TV studio in a box and the comments room. Or who's watching this piecemeal in pieces. Maybe half hour a night for 5 nights. However you get through it, get through it. If you have any follow-up questions, everybody knows where to find me. Of course, on LinkedIn, here on the YouTube channel, you can leave a comment. It also helps with the algorithm. Empathize with the like button. Join our Slack workspace, and tip jar is optional. Denise says, enjoyed every minute. Thank you, Denise, for sticking with it as long as you did. And for everybody who stayed, many of you stayed quite a long time. I appreciate that. I know many of you had to drop off because it is the middle of your work days for North America, but thank you so much. And of course, this is immediately archived on the YouTube channel. And I will work probably over the weekend adding chapters to it. That's where YouTube videos jump to exact times. That way, if you want to send pieces of this to some of your coworkers or leaders, you'll be able to jump to certain chapters. So I will try to do that maybe over the weekend. I will just take a few minutes to ask if there are any questions about anything that I've presented, anything people are concerned about, questions. I'm happy to speak to things. Otherwise, we'll try to wrap up in the next 5 minutes. And thanks again to everybody for sticking around so long. Very happy to see Darren and Seth and hi, Orit and Scott and Sonia. Hi, Sonia. Thank you so much. I hope everybody feels like there's a little bit of hope to start some of these conversations. Maybe again, run this video by your manager. Hopefully you have a real UX manager and not being managed by other department, but hopefully you've got some people that you can run this by. But again, if you're struggling, you can always reach out to me. I answer questions personally on our Slack channel all the time. Seth says, awesome session, Debbie. Thank you, Seth. Thank you for coming by, especially outside of your work hours when it should be time for resting and not thinking about worky things. So that being said, I guess I will play us out of here. But let's see, quick look at the calendar, and remember that our calendar can also be found at, let's put it up on the screen, deltacx.link/events will give you a Google Calendar of all of the other live streams that are coming up. For August, I am mostly planning micro lessons, and for the rest of July, we have some wonderful guests. Of course, by the way, today is Dr. Nick's birthday. If you find Dr. Nick, wish him a happy birthday. We'll be back on Friday with a reaction stream. We'll be back on Monday with Michelle Ronson on convincing leadership to go for UX research. Tuesday the 13th is everybody's monthly favorite, Office Hours Ask Us Anything, where Darren and Dr. Nick join me for 2 hours of answering your questions. Get them ready, send them in to deltacx.link/ask. Send them in now. Let's see, Friday the 16th, reaction stream. Monday the 19th, Enterprise UX will be our topic with Stephanie Walter, a friend of the show and person who makes fan art. Tuesday will be our double office hours, which I do once a month. I do early office hours for time zones east of me and regular time. Friday the 23rd, reaction stream. Monday the 26th, content design, content strategy, and writing. Wednesday the 28th, Vivian Castillo will be talking about healing conversations. So excited to see her. And Friday, July 30th, reaction stream. And where's Daniel? Daniel's somewhere in here. Or Daniel's August 2. Daniel will be coming back by popular demand. So thanks again to everybody for the super extra long version of this, the 12-inch disco remix. But I guess we'll catch everybody Friday for reactions. Thanks again for joining me. I hope this helps, and I'd love to hear how it works at your organization or how it fails, and so we can keep improving the model. Thanks. Wear lots of masks and be well. Bye.
Delta CX, available for CX and UX consulting, projects, and training. Contact us for a free consultation